The Sands Hotel, Las Vegas, April 1966. Dean Martin stops mid-song. His hands freeze on the piano keys. 1,200 people hold their breath. Somewhere in the darkness of the Copa room, a child is singing. Her voice is crystal clear, heartbreakingly pure. She's completing the verse Dean just abandoned. He stands up slowly, microphone forgotten. The band stops playing, confused. The only sound now is this impossible voice floating up from the crowd like something from another world. Dean shields his eyes against the spotlight, searching. "Keep singing, sweetheart," he says, his voice cracking. "Help me find you." What happens next will be talked about in Vegas for decades, because the girl singing, she's 10 years old, and she's been blind since birth. But that's not what made Dean Martin cry in front of a sold-out crowd. It was 7 words she said afterward. 7 words that shattered the carefully constructed image of the coolest man in show business. This is that story. Act 1. The Setup. To understand what happened that night, you need to know who Dean Martin really was in 1966, not the character, the man. By April of '66, Dean was at the absolute peak of his career. His TV variety show pulled 40 million viewers every Thursday night. His recording of Everybody Loves Somebody had knocked the Beatles off the #1 spot 2 years earlier. He was making more money than almost anyone in entertainment. But here's what most people didn't see. Dean Martin was profoundly lonely. The persona, the laid-back crooner with a martini in his hand, the guy who looked like he didn't have a care in the world, that was armor, protection. Dean had spent his entire career making sure nobody saw past it. He'd grown up Dino Crossetti in Steubenville, Ohio, son of an Italian immigrant barber. Spoke no English until he was 5, dropped out of school in 10th grade, worked as a blackjack dealer, a boxer, a steel mill worker. The transformation from Dino Crossetti to Dean Martin wasn't just a name change, it was a complete reconstruction. New nose, courtesy of a surgery after a boxing match, new accent, new personality. The real Dean, the one who worried, who felt deeply, who carried the weight of always performing, that person stayed hidden until April 15th, 1966. The Girl from Brooklyn. Maria Castellano was 10 years old, 72 pounds, with dark hair that fell past her shoulders. She'd been born without sight. Retinopathy of prematurity, the doctors said. Her optic nerves never fully developed. But Maria heard things other people missed. Her father, Antonio, was a tailor in Brooklyn. Her mother, Rosa, cleaned houses in Manhattan. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Bensonhurst. Money was always tight. But every Sunday after church, Antonio would put on his Dean Martin records, and Maria would sit completely still, head tilted, absorbing every note. "She'd catch things I never heard," Rosa would later recall. She'd say, "Mama, did you hear how sad he sounded on that word?" I'd play it back, and she was always right. Maria had memorized every Dean Martin song she could find. Not just the lyrics, the breath patterns, the phrasing, the tiny moments where Dean's voice would catch with real emotion. "I can hear him smiling," she told her parents once. "But sometimes, right in the middle of the smile, I can hear him being lonely, too." For her 10th birthday, Maria asked for only one thing: to hear Dean Martin sing in person. Antonio and Rosa saved for 6 months, $6 here, $10 there. They skipped meals. Rosa took extra houses. Antonio worked late alterations. By April, they had enough for 3 plane tickets to Las Vegas and 1 night at a cheap hotel off the Strip. The Sands show tickets cost them almost everything they had left. "She wants to hear him," Antonio told Rosa. "We make it happen." That night in the Copa room, April 15th, 1966. the second show. The Copa room was the jewel of the Sands Hotel. Frank Sinatra had made it famous. Now Dean owned it. The Castellanos sat at table 7 in Section B. Not great seats, too far from the stage for most people to see clearly, but Maria didn't need to see. The air was thick with cigarette smoke and the clatter of cocktail glasses. Women in evening gowns, men in tuxedos, high rollers betting thousands downstairs before coming up for the show. Dean walked on stage at 11:47 p.m. to thunderous applause. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, hair slicked back, that half smile playing on his lips. He carried a rocks glass filled with what looked like whiskey, but was actually apple juice. The drunk act. Everyone loved it. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you to the Sands, where the drinks are cold and the blackjack dealers are colder." The crowd roared. For 90 minutes, Dean gave them exactly what they expected. The hits, the jokes, the casual sips from his glass. The impression that he'd rather be anywhere else but here, but somehow couldn't help being charming. Maria sat perfectly still through all of it, her hands folded in her lap. "Papa, when is he going to sing the real songs?" "Soon, Bambina, soon." At 1:23 a.m., Dean sat down at the white grand piano.
"You know," he said into the microphone, "I'm supposed to have a piano player for this next bit, but I think he's downstairs losing my money." Laughter rippled through the room. Dean's fingers found the keys, the opening chords of Everybody Loves Somebody. This was the moment Maria had been waiting for her entire life. As Dean began to sing, something shifted in the room. The jokes stopped, the casualness fell away. For these few minutes, the real Dean emerged. His voice, rich, warm, perfectly controlled, filled every corner of the Copa room. "Everybody loves somebody sometime." Maria knew every microsecond of this song. She'd listened to Dean's recording 417 times. She'd memorized not just the notes, but the feeling behind them. And now, hearing him live, she could hear something she'd never caught on the records. Pain. Deep, aching loneliness wrapped in honey and sold as romance. She couldn't help herself. Her voice joined his, high, pure, perfectly in tune. "Everybody falls in love somehow." Dean stopped singing mid-phrase. His hands went still on the piano. The band, confused, gradually stopped playing. For 3 seconds, the only sound in the 1,200-seat showroom was Maria Castellano's voice, continuing the song alone. "Something in my heart keeps saying, my someday will come along." The audience began turning, searching for the source of that impossible voice. Dean stood up from the piano. He walked to the edge of the stage and shielded his eyes against the spotlight. "Hold on," he said quietly. His voice had lost all its practiced smoothness. This was raw, real. "I need to find where that angel is hiding." He pointed toward Section B. "Keep singing, sweetheart. Let me find you." When the mask fell, Dean Martin did something he had never done in 15 years of Vegas performances. He stepped off the stage. He walked through the crowd, between tables, following Maria's voice like a beacon. Security guards moved to intercept him, but he waved them off. Table 7. Maria was still singing, completely unaware that she'd stopped the entire show. Her parents sat frozen, tears streaming down their faces. Dean knelt beside her chair. That's when he saw it. The way her eyes didn't quite focus on him. The way her hands reached out slightly, searching. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked softly. Maria turned toward his voice. Her face lit up with a smile that Dean would remember for the rest of his life. "Maria Castellano," said Maria, "and you're the most wonderful singer in the whole world, Mr. Martin." Dean felt something crack inside his chest, some wall he'd built 30 years ago. "How old are you, Maria?" 10. "And you know all my songs?" "Every one," said Maria.
Then she added, so quietly that only Dean and her parents could hear, "I know the real ones and the pretend ones." Dean blinked. "What do you mean, honey?" Maria reached out and found his hand, her small fingers wrapped around his. "Sometimes you sing like you're telling jokes, but sometimes you sing like you're telling the truth. I like the truth songs better." 1,200 people watched in complete silence as Dean Martin, the coolest man in show business, struggled to compose himself. "Would you like to come up on stage with me?" he finally managed. The Copa room erupted. On stage, Dean took Maria's hand and led her through the crowd, up the stairs, onto the stage. The spotlight was blinding, but Maria couldn't see it anyway. "You nervous?" asked Dean as he helped her onto the piano bench beside him. "No," said Maria simply. "I've been practicing for this my whole life." Dean had to turn away for a moment. When he turned back, his eyes were wet. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Maria Castellano, and she's about to teach me something about singing." He began playing "Everybody Loves Somebody" again. This time, when Maria's voice joined his from the first note, something magical happened. Their voices wove together, his seasoned baritone, her pristine soprano. The 1,200 people in the Copa room witnessed something none of them would ever forget. But it wasn't just the music. It was watching Dean Martin's face change. The half-smile vanished. The casual posture fell away. For these few minutes, the real Dean emerged. Tears ran down his cheeks openly. Dean Martin was crying in front of a sold-out Vegas crowd. When the song ended, the standing ovation lasted 4 full minutes. Dean sat at the piano with his arm around Maria, unable to speak. Finally, Maria turned her face toward him. "Mr. Martin," she said, "are you crying?" Dean laughed and wiped his eyes. "Yeah, sweetheart, I am." "Why?" Dean was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something the audience couldn't hear, his voice too low for the microphone to catch.
But Antonio Castellano, standing in the wings where security had moved him, heard it. He heard every word. And later, he would tell people what Dean Martin said in that moment. The 7 words. Maria had asked Dean why he was crying. Dean looked at this 10-year-old girl who had stopped his show, who had seen through 30 years of carefully constructed persona, who had heard the truth in his voice when everyone else just heard the performance. He leaned close to her ear. "Because you showed me something I forgot," he said. Maria waited. Dean took a shaky breath. "You showed me it's okay to be real." 7 words. It's okay to be real. Maria smiled. Then she said something that would stay with Dean for the rest of his life. "I always hear the real you, Mr. Martin, every time you sing the ballads. That's why I love your music, because you can't hide when you really sing." Dean hugged her close. His shoulders shook. The Copa room audience watched in stunned silence as the coolest man in show business completely fell apart. The aftermath. Dean helped Maria back to her parents' table. He knelt beside Antonio and Rosa. "Your daughter," he said, his voice still thick with emotion, "is extraordinary. And she just taught me more about music than I learned in 30 years. He pulled out a card, his manager's personal number. "I want to pay for Maria's voice training, the best teachers in New York, everything she needs. Please let me do this." Antonio tried to refuse. Dean cut him off. "She's got something the world needs to hear," he said, "and I need to do this. For her, for me." Before leaving their table, Dean leaned close to Maria one more time. "Will you promise me something, honey?" "Anything, Mr. Martin. Promise me you keep singing the truth,
Because when you do that, you show people it's okay to be real. And the world needs that more than you know. I promise, Maria said. Dean kissed her forehead and walked back to the stage. The rest of the show was different. He dropped the drunk act. He made fewer jokes. He just sang, really sang, the way he'd been afraid to sing for 30 years. The audience didn't know what to do with this version of Dean Martin, but they couldn't look away. What happened next? By morning, every newspaper in Las Vegas was running the story. Dean Martin crying during performance. Blind girl stops Vegas show. The night Dean got real. Dean arranged for Maria and her family to stay 3 more days, all expenses paid. Every night before his show, Maria would visit his dressing room. They'd sit at his piano and sing together. No audience, no performance, just 2 people making music. During one of these sessions, Dean opened up in a way he never had with anyone. "You know what's funny?" he said. "I spent my whole life trying to make people think I didn't care about anything, and you were the first person who saw through it without even looking." Maria smiled. "That's because I listen, Mr. Martin, really listen, and your voice tells me everything." True to his word, Dean paid for Maria's vocal training throughout her childhood and into college. They stayed in touch through letters and phone calls. As Maria's voice matured, she became an opera singer, performing at Lincoln Center, the Met, La Scala. But she always credited that night in the Copa room as the moment that shaped everything. "Dean Martin taught me that vulnerability is power," she would tell interviewers. "He showed me that letting people see your true self isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing you can do." The full circle. In March 1987, Dean's son, Dino Jr., was killed when his F-4 Phantom jet crashed into a mountain. Dean was devastated. He withdrew from public life, stopped performing. Many people thought he'd never recover. Maria flew from New York to Los Angeles to be with him. She sat with Dean in his grief. They didn't talk much, but one evening she asked if they could sing together, just once. Dean sat at his piano. Maria stood by him. They sang "Everybody Loves Somebody" one more time, just the 2 of them. No audience, no performance. When they finished, Dean was crying again. "You saved me once, sweetheart," he told her. "That night in Vegas when I forgot who I really was, you reminded me it was okay to feel things." Maria took his hand. "And you saved me, Mr. Martin. You showed me my voice could matter, that I could make a difference."
The motto, inscribed above the door of their New York headquarters, comes from what Dean told Maria that night in 1966. It's okay to be real. The foundation has helped thousands of children discover their voices, not just literally, but figuratively, teaching them that their differences don't diminish them, that vulnerability is strength, that being seen, truly seen, is the greatest gift we can give each other. The Sands Hotel, where it all happened, was demolished in 1996, but the story lives on. There's a bootleg recording of that performance, terrible quality, recorded on someone's hidden tape recorder, but if you listen closely, you can hear it all. Dean's voice cracking with emotion, Maria's pure soprano joining his, the moment when everything stopped. And at the very end, if you turn the volume all the way up, you can hear Dean Martin crying. It's one of the most treasured recordings in the Dean Martin archive, not because of its technical quality, but because it captured the moment when a blind 10-year-old girl taught one of the world's biggest stars how to truly see. The lesson. That night in the Copa room, among cigarette smoke and cocktails and 1,200 people expecting a performance, something extraordinary happened. A little girl who couldn't see anything showed a superstar how to be seen. She heard past the jokes and casual charm, past the carefully constructed image, past 30 years of armor. She heard the truth, and she had the courage to sing along with it. And in doing so, she gave Dean Martin permission to do something he'd been afraid to do his entire life: be real. 7 words that changed everything. It's okay to be real. In a world that rewards performance, that celebrates image over authenticity, that asks us to hide our vulnerabilities and our fears, Maria Castellano reminded us of something essential. The moments we're most afraid to show others, the moments when our voice cracks, when tears fall, when the mask slips, those are often the moments that matter most. Those are the moments when we're finally, truly singing.